Hi, I'm Neil Milton. Profitable innovation. Not any old innovation, not innovation for innovation's sake, innovation so that your business can be more profitable. And in particular, focusing on real strategies for real business. This presentation is not about innovation for startups. It's about real innovation for real businesses that are up and running now and simply want to get better. The agenda. We're going to start by developing an innovation framework, a way of thinking about innovation and which innovations are more likely to succeed. Develop that innovation framework very simply, actually, by looking at what doesn't work, what clearly is high risk, low reward, and what doesn't work. So, 5 myths of innovation, and then the innovator's curse, what clearly can happen if things go wrong with innovation. Drawing upon what does not work, we'll develop this very simple framework for thinking about what is more likely to work. And in particular, what is more likely to work for an existing business is trying to do an old thing a new way. That's the crux of the framework for thinking about innovation. From that framework, we can derive 3 relatively low risk, high reward rules of thumb or types of innovation that are more likely than not to help grow and help drive the business forward. Let's turn to the 5 great myths of innovation, 5 pieces of folklore that I want you to forget right now. The first myth is that innovation is only for high-tech companies. That's rubbish. In fact, many of the most profitable and successful innovations are ones implemented in the oldest and most mature industries. They may mean adopting some new technology, but these are not what you usually think of as high technology companies. The second great myth is that innovation is about revolutionary change. Revolutions rarely produce profit in the near term. Successful innovation in existing businesses, more often than not, is about evolutionary change, incremental steps that you can manage. You may want to keep innovating constantly or as frequently as you can, but small, steady steps win the race. It's very much a tortoise and the hare phenomenon. The tortoise who continues to innovate at a steady pace is much more likely to succeed than the hare. Third myth, innovation is only for startups. And obviously, if that weren't a myth, we wouldn't be having this seminar. I strongly believe that innovation is frequently most effective and successful for existing small, medium-sized businesses. In fact, if you already have customers and you already have staff, you have resources, you have contacts, you have an awareness of what's happening in the market that many startups completely lack, and they go wrong because they don't have that understanding of their customers and their competitors. On the other hand, innovating in large environments, in big companies, can be extremely difficult because they're so slow to change. So while they may have lots of money, they may have great resistance to trying something new. Small, medium-sized businesses are often the most nimble, the easiest place to implement innovations. The fourth myth, and the dirty little secret of innovation, is that innovation is not always profitable. In fact, it can be a complete disaster if not implemented successfully. Lastly, and this is heresy for an intellectual property lawyer to say, and my colleagues will probably come after me, but there's a great myth that profit only comes from creating and protecting new ideas, so from generating new intellectual property. That's rubbish, and I'm going to show you why, and in fact how you can most effectively profit from other people's intellectual property. Here's an image which I believe captures the innovator's curse very well. Initially, when I found this picture, I wasn't so sure it was perfect with the dark sky and it's kind of boring. And then I realized that foreboding image and that uncertainty about where we are and what we're doing even better captures the innovator's curse than I had first hoped. Innovation is hard work. It can be expensive, exhausting, and not very glamorous. It's like breaking trail in the snow on your own. But moreover, it's like breaking trail without a map. You don't know exactly where you're going. You don't know exactly what will work. that can frequently lead to exploring dead ends, to a series of zigzags. Those zigzags are time consuming and they are expensive. Who benefits from the innovator? Very frequently, the person behind the innovator. Having been shown the way, you don't have to break trail and you don't have to pursue all the dead ends. You can shortcut straight to the objective while avoiding the cost and time consumption of pursuing the false leads. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of having this image in your head for what can go wrong when you're trying to innovate. So it's crucial to try, but you must remember things can go badly. How do we minimize the risk? In my view, one of the best ways to minimize the risk of innovation is to think about what I call the 3 quadrants of change. Now, there are 4 quadrants on this chart, and they are colored: gray, yellow, green, and red. And what I've done here is simply break down into 2 choices. There's what you're trying to do, that's the thing. And is it an old thing or a new thing that you're trying to do? An old thing is what you currently do, what you currently sell to your customers, or how you do business. And the way is the way that you achieve it, the way you deliver that thing. So you can either do it an old way or a new way. So the gray quadrant is not a quadrant of change. It is the same old, same old. It's gray, it's boring, but that's what you're currently doing right now, either in the back end of your business or for your customers. So let's think about the other options. Doing a new thing an old way is possible. It's not terribly common, although the best example there is to add an innovative product line to your existing business. So you take your existing business and try to sell something new that customers haven't previously been exposed to. The red quadrant is the quadrant that where all the public attention is focused. That's the sexy quadrant. That's the cool quadrant. Do some new thing a new way. Every time you hear a story about kids in somebody's basement selling their company to Yahoo for $1 billion, almost always it's about a new thing a new way. That's an extremely risky quadrant to play in, and for most small and medium-sized businesses, not a good quadrant to play in. The quadrant to focus on is trying to do an old thing a new way. And that's why I've chosen the color green for that quadrant. Green means go. So what's so great about trying to do an old thing a new way? What you're trying to do is change how you do what you do. The beautiful thing about this kind of change is you have a proven customer need. And so you're not having to do a lot of missionary selling. You're not out trying to convince customers to buy something they've never bought before. That's extremely difficult and extremely expensive. And that's one of the things that's so risky and difficult with trying a new thing a new way. People underestimate how difficult it is to change customer behaviors. You may have a better mousetrap, but getting customers to buy it can exhaust you before you achieve success. The other great thing, however, about trying to do an old thing a new way is you have an existing benchmark, and so you can clearly benchmark whether what you're trying to do is an improvement or not. It may be a new way. Is it a better way? Does it make things happen better, faster, cheaper? So for an existing business that has customers and has staff and has revenue, focus on trying to do some part of your business better, faster, and or cheaper in a manner that makes it possible for you to either make more money or attract more customers or give the customers a better deal without changing the customer behavior. And in particular then, that's why I say for SMEs, many of the most successful innovations are invisible. I think the trendy word would be they're transparent, but I think invisible is a better word. They're invisible to the client. You're doing something that the client doesn't need to see that makes it possible for you to deliver your service or product better, faster, and cheaper. And just to illustrate, let's look at a bunch of successful, trendy new companies, but which are trying new things new way. These companies have been very successful, but there have been many, many, many failures behind them. In fact, you can argue that it's hard to know whether Twitter's been a success or not because they've not made any money. And I don't know about you, but ultimately spending other people's money doesn't make your business a success. But the crux of this is that's fine for a few well-funded startups in Silicon Valley, but it's not for me, and I suspect it's not for you. Here are some examples of companies which have done old things new way, and that their entire focus has simply been on doing something better, faster, and cheaper. All three of these companies are big names, and I'm not suggesting that you're suddenly going to become big name tomorrow, but they become big names because in their day were extremely innovative, and that innovation is what fueled their growth. Even Amazon, which people tend to think of as a technology company, and it is, but it fundamentally is simply doing an old thing new way. It's selling stuff. It's a retailer, and it's retailing to you in a new way. And it uses all sorts of fancy algorithms to determine what to recommend to you that you might want to buy. That technology is fueling the growth, but fundamentally Amazon is an innovative retailer. It's a company doing an old thing a new way. I want to give you one more example of a really successful company that many people think of as a technology company, is best thought of as doing an old thing a new way. Few things are more old than performance reviews, and few things are less loved than performance reviews. Everybody needs to do them. No one wants to do them, and certainly no one wants to do them on time. Along came a company called Halogen Software that was founded in 2002 and has rapidly grown to $50 million in revenue. They've just raised $50 million in cash on a $250 million valuation. Now, whether the market valuation is fair or appropriate or not, I'm not here to comment on. The simple fact of the matter is they've been very successful, grown very quickly, and yet at their core, what they are doing is fixing an old problem. They're doing an old thing a new way, a better way. And I said I would talk about intellectual property. Halogen has no patents. They have copyrights, and their software is protected by copyright, but no patents, nothing protecting their business that prevents someone else from doing it. That's not the name of the game. The name of the game is simply offering your customers, your target market, something that is better, faster, and cheaper than they were using before to achieve the same or similar outcome. So what works for SMEs? Well, I look back, look at our innovator's curse, flip it on its head. What we want to do is everything that avoids the innovator's curse. If someone else is breaking trail, follow them. Be a fast follower. Repurpose ideas that work. Don't try to come up with a brilliant new idea if someone else has already come up with a brilliant new idea. Just repurpose the ideas that work. And lastly, use, albeit without infringing, other people's ideas and other people's intellectual property. So the first one of those rules, be a smart, fast follower. The trick is to be close, but not too close to the leader. Let the leader break the trail and you draft behind them. You see which ideas are working. You want to be close enough to their leaders that you're not getting dropped from the back of the pack. You want to be near the leaders of the race. But at the same time, you want them to do the hard work, breaking the wind, and you draft them. And you want to have them go down the blind alleys and you take the shortcuts. In my business, for instance, I make a point of trying to find out what the thought leaders are up to. My business is very, very international. Patent and trademark business is a worldwide business. I go to several conferences every year, and I make a point of finding out what the leaders are up to, what the leaders in marketing are doing, what the leaders in HR are doing, what the leaders in technology, and I try to cherry pick. I try to get close, but just close to the leaders. Another thing you can do is to repurpose a good idea. Look at these three businesses. They seem to be quite different, actually. Staples, the Home Depot, and Chapters, or Chapters Indigo. And yet, they're really just three versions of the same idea, an idea that none of the three of them actually was the first inventor of. These are three big box retailers. What they've done is focus on one category of goods, built very big stores, driven down prices, and focused relentlessly on one product category. It is the same basic idea, repurposed. You can do the same thing by looking for people who have good ideas that are applicable to your business. And where do you find them? Well, you find them in other places, so in other countries or other provinces, even other cities, or you find them in other businesses, in adjacent businesses. You know, if you're a dentist, maybe you should be looking at what vets are doing, or vice versa. Maybe if you're a vet, you should be looking at what dentists are doing. If you're an accountant, maybe you should be looking at what lawyers are doing. Or if you're a lawyer, look at what accountants are doing. Or the same applies to many, many businesses. And you'll find that someone in an adjacent or similar or comparable business somewhere in the world has had a great idea. And if they're showing results with that idea, maybe you can adopt it. Often you can use other people's ideas without any problems at all. But sometimes there are intellectual property rights in those ideas, and you need to be attentive to those rights. But there are really two choices. Either the idea is now in the public domain and you can use it freely, or it's not, in which case you potentially need to license it. Here's an example of licensed intellectual property, of using someone else's intellectual property rights. And while you might think it seems a little self-serving, it actually is an excellent example of the points I've been trying to make. Every business needs to market, and this book represents an effort by me to innovate in our marketing. So very much doing an old thing a new way. Equally important is that it is a change that does not require any change to customer behavior. We in fact give this book away for free. It's entirely a business development tool, and therefore it's an innovation that made no change to the customer behavior and yet got us in front of many, many more people. Now the other crucial aspect is that none of the intellectual property belongs to me. All of the trademarks, the brand, the copyright, all of that belonging to Dummies. In fact, it belongs to John Wiley & Son, who owns the Dummies brand. We simply are a licensed user, and we purchase the books from them and give them to our clients. Lastly, look at this example. Dragon's Den is quite possibly the most successful show on Canadian television ever related to entrepreneurship. And yet, you wouldn't normally think of the CBC as a bastion of innovation. In fact, Dragon's Den and its existence on CBC is an excellent example of the points I've been trying to make. Actually, it was originally a Japanese television show. So the show is based upon the original intellectual property of the Japanese creators, repurposed for various locales. Now, it's not a complete snap. You don't just take a Japanese television show and suddenly have a great success in Canada, the United States, and the UK. First of all, you need to localize it. And so in each country, the format has been localized for the local jurisdiction. Presumably that's why we even see different names for the program in the United States and in Canada. The format is also slightly different, or at least the temper is slightly different. I find the UK, the BBC version, rather snarky compared to the Canadian version. Also, of course, it requires considerable amount of work by the producers, the local producers, on an ongoing basis. I didn't say that this whole process was easy. I simply said that it was a kickstart to innovation. In the case of Dragon's Den, you need to first recruit dragons. That's not a simple task. You then need to recruit prospects, and you need to prepare and shoot episodes, and you need to do that repetitively for any given season and then for subsequent seasons. And as we've seen at Dragon's Den in Canada, you need to figure out a way to have continuity even though you have a changing cast of dragons. But I never said that innovation would be easy. I simply said that if you follow some of my recommendations, it would be easier and more likely to succeed. And in that respect, the Dragon's Den franchise is an outstanding example of the principles that I've been trying to illustrate. It's an example of using someone else's intellectual property legitimately and under license, and then repurposing it, shaping it for the local market, and relaunching it into a local market. And we see tremendous success from that reuse of someone else's innovation. So there you have it, a very simple, powerful framework for thinking about innovation, about why you want to try to do an old thing a new way, in a way that is invisible to your clients. And 3 simple techniques that you can use now to go look for innovations that you can incorporate in your business quickly and cost effectively, and hopefully accelerate your business forward. I look forward to your questions and your feedback.